Now this will be a road to mastering pull-ups, and I'm not just talking about chin-ups, which is a baby exercise. No, I am talking about complete pull-up mastery in any direction and in any sort of combination. Which means that your very first exercise to start out with is the wall pull, the lowest effort, lowest impact pulling exercise you can do in calisthenics, which leads us to the inverted barbell row. And we will differentiate between the one where we start extending our hips and the one where we start in an already extended position, keeping our glutes and our spinal erectors tight. Once you're strong enough to get in a couple of reps with this sort of height, all you need to do to progress is lower that bar, requiring more strength, tension and control, and then moving us to the elevated inverted row, taking your pulling strength to a whole new level, meaning that you are now ready to simulate an actual pull-up, elevating that bar until your arms are completely extended with your butt on the floor. And this time we will start extending at the hip at the very top and bending when lowering down, which is going to minimize the amount of help we get from our legs. With the next variation being a pull behind our head, so we can work a little bit on our scapular control, specifically our scapular depression as well as our scapular elevation, adding a little bit more mobility to these parts, with two more very important movement patterns on the actual bar, being the classic symmetrical scapular pull-up and the asymmetrical or unilateral scapular pull-up, deepening our control and understanding of scapular movement even more, while now combining more abduction and adduction with elevation and depression. So we can finally move on to an underhand grip chin-up, or as I have aptly dubbed it, the baby pull. With this variation being more of a biceps and arm dominant pull than a latissimus and back dominant movement pattern. Make sure that you can pump out 4 to 5 real, perfectly executed, good form repetitions before you move on to the overhand latissimus dominant actual pull-up, which is level number 1 of pull-up mastery. All of the stuff we've done before has been preliminary work to get you to this level. Moving us to the archer, an asymmetrical overhand lateral movement, with the addition of having a little bit more deltoid inclusion in this movement due to having to hold the top, which moves us to the typewriter pull-up, the lateral movement being at the very top of the motion before we reverse the same movement again, now adding even more deltoid and chest inclusion due to the pulling motion at the top. And then of course we put all of that together into one single movement, which is a complete circular pull-up where we go up diagonally, switch sides at the top and reverse. For those of you who want to work on the more advanced variations before they can do 5 repetitions of the one before that, you can add a bande de résistance, so you can start working on your form before you have the necessary strength to do these exercises without any assistance. With this, concluding our pulling exercises and our progression, so you have a little bit to work on for the next couple of months to even years. An insanely effective full body tension and isometric strength exercise. That was a hard sentence to say. We have a plank position, but not just any plank position. Stay with me. We want to progress our strength from a classic plank position, lengthening our body step by step as much as we can and getting closer and closer and closer to the ground. Now be sure not to go too high up with your hips. Start pushing your pelvis forward and flexing your entire abdominal musculature. Keep your arms extended, your legs as well, and try and hold this Lilane plank as closely to the ground as possible until you go full shaking. Take a short break and repeat once more. The Lilane plank requires an insane amount of strength, control, and tension, and over time you're gonna be building absurdly strong core musculature, but not just that, you're strengthening your entire anterior chain in conjunction with your posterior chain. And if you're struggling with planks, you can start with the assisted plank, knees on the ground, and then start raising those knees with your hands right below your shoulders, and just over time start working your way into this longer and longer and longer position until you are as close to the ground as you dare. Absolutely amazing exercise. And if you can hold this for 10 to 20 seconds, that is already an insane testament to your full body strength. Moving us to what people enjoy most about calisthenics: exercising their legs. Yeah, I know, people just love that, they never skip it. That is why we put that progression almost at the very end, starting out with this. What is this, you might ask? This is how you will be able to get into a complete ass to grass deep squat if you do not have the necessary mobility, be it in your ankles, your knees, your hips, or even worse, lacking the core strength to keep your body from falling back when you are at the lowest point of this movement pattern. Elevating your heels will make it much easier for you to go through a full range of motion, and over time get rid of these and work with your feet flat on the ground. With our second variation requiring a lot more strength, even though the change doesn't look like much, switch from this to this, extend our arms, and now we're gonna increase the massive inclusion of your core as well as your quads, but most importantly, your goddamn hip flexors, because most people's hip flexors are weak as f, and you are going to suffer for it. Moving us to a wide stance for the Cossack squat, with the first level being able to get your hip joint all the way down to knee height. The second level being able to sit down all the way with external rotation in our hip to add a little bit of stretch in our posterior chain. The next level being going all the way down, getting your knee to the floor and adding some posterior chain strength, specifically your biceps and your glutes, as well as your spinal erectors. And the next bonus level, for those of you who want to add a little bit more mobility and challenge, we go into an asymmetrical pseudo back bridge, adding the lower body strength and flexibility with the upper body strength, flexibility, and control. Moving us to the pistol squat, which is easier to work on if you have an elevation. You can start out at the top, lower down, requiring less strength for your hip flexors and a lot less flexibility in your posterior chain. Then move to a standing starting position and go through the exact same pattern, now requiring all of the stuff we got rid of with the elevation. And then moving to the actual true form of doing pistol squats, with the starting position being a seated one with your upper body and your legs fully extended, requiring an insane amount of core and hip flexor inclusion to raise up from the ground, all the way up, all the way down, sit down, extend, starting position before you move on to the next repetition. As a sweet, sweet bonus, we will add the elevated dragon squat, requiring the least amount of mobility you can have when doing a dragon squat, but with almost all the same benefits when it comes to quad strength and leg strength in general. The box jump is all about building explosive strength and speed for our leg musculature, jumping from the spot with both feet simultaneously and maximizing the amount of strength we can generate throughout the single movement, helping us build not only a lot of strength, but also pack on some size when it comes to our leg musculature, and masterful control throughout speedy movements. Not to mention that working on box jumps is an insane amount of fun and an amazing experience of success due to how easily you can scale it to make it more and more demanding, simply by increasing the elevation you want to jump on until you are close to barely being able to get fully up there. This of course also includes the single leg box jump for the same kind of unilateral strength and control we mentioned with the pistol squat. Moving us to a rapid fire push progression. And by now you should know that we are prioritizing perfect form, which is why we're gonna start with the assisted scapular push-up. Just going through adduction and abduction in a controlled fashion with your arms extended, and continuing with the classic scapular push-up for even more scapular control and strength. Two of the most important things you will ever need when it comes to upper body calisthenics capabilities. Stay with me, we're just getting started. Moving on to the classic assisted push-up, and here comes the very important part and why we have been working on all of that scapular control, because a push-up doesn't end here, it ends here with complete scapular abduction and a little bit of thoracic spinal flexion. So we actually have the complete range of motion. And if you have been doing push-ups, just these couple of inches left in the movement make it so much harder and increase the engagement of your chest musculature almost by double, which is a very scientific and statistical number I did not invent myself. Then you're allowed to raise your knees and go for classic push-ups. And once again, don't forget that abduction and spinal flexion all the way down, touchy, and all the way up. Extend and abduct. And as they say, diamonds are a girl's best friend because they actually do increase your titty size by strengthening your chest. But even more so, diamond push-ups have a lot of arm dominance, helping you build a nice triceps, both when it comes to strength as well as size. And before we can move to the explosive type 2 muscle fiber movements, we still have the lateral movement of the archer push-up as well as the typewriter, which we already did as pulling variations. And a little bit more demanding, the circular push-up movement, just like we did with the pull-ups. So you can cover pretty much every single upper body fiber all the way down through your core, and even including some hip flexor and some quad strength due to the massive tension we need to hold in this movement. And from the explosive family tree, we have the classic jumping push-up, the staggered jumping push-up, and only, and I mean only, when you feel really safe in those two, should you attempt the clapping jumping push-up for an even longer range of motion and even more strength dominance. One of the most, if not the most effective push-up variation you can do. Hands on the floor, fingers as wide apart as possible so we can have a little bit more surface area. Feet flat on the wall. We're gonna bend in our hips and in our knees, pushing back, extending our arms as much as we can and lengthening our shoulders. And we're gonna push away from the wall, moving down all the way with extended legs as closely to the ground as we can, and reverse by pulling backwards, bending our knees and our hips before we repeat the process once more. And this exercise is going to require a lot of core strength and a lot of tension to be able to go through this movement in a controlled fashion and with a long range of motion. Sit, hold. And here's why most people will never achieve this exercise. Not because they are too weak or not working enough on their strength, but because they are not flexible enough to get into a position where they can raise their legs from here. Now, it doesn't look like much, but this position does require a lot of posterior chain flexibility. And you can test it out. For most people, if they want to sit down with legs completely extended, pulling their toes in and extending their upper body, most of you will already have a nice stretch in their posterior chain. And forgetting to work on the flexibility is going to bite you in the ass sooner or later, and it will when you are working on the L sit hold. So we will work on the flexibility, the strength, the coordination and the control, starting with a very easy exercise. This. It doesn't look like much. All we want to do is switch between anterior and posterior pelvic tilt. Around your back, relax that position, lengthen your toes, release all the musculature in your posterior chain, and then pull those toes in and extend your back, tilt your pelvis until you feel a nice stretch in your entire posterior chain. And once you're here, you're gonna bend forward the slightest bit. Reverse, release, and repeat. Now this exercise, while it does stretch our posterior chain, it also starts working on the strength in our anterior chain, as well as the control over our quads, over our hip flexors, over our entire hip musculature. And this is going to help us not only with the L-sit, but with a lot of other exercises in calisthenics. And in between, you can go for a static stretch as well. Touch your toes, just like so. Take a deep breath in. And when breathing out, extend those legs and extend your back as well, getting even more stretch in your posterior chain going. Now, this improvised contraction is gonna make things so much easier for us. You're gonna elevate your butt and you want another elevation, because we don't just wanna work on our hip flexors and anterior chain strength like so, but we also wanna start adding our arms and shoulders. Elevate, left side, sit back down. Elevate, right side, sit back down. Two things to keep in mind. 1. We want to pull that leg up as much as we can, flexing here, 2. Release here, combining both flexibility and strength. And we want to hold the top for 10 to 15 seconds, or at the very least, get to the point where we can. Switch it up, 15 seconds, left side, 15 seconds, right side. And before you make it harder on yourself, we're gonna do the same thing on our fingertips because we need to strengthen our hands. And I would suggest taking your time while strengthening your hands, because while the musculature can get pretty strong pretty fast, your tendons and ligaments are gonna take some time. Big sit up and sit up and get rid of that butt elevation. Keep the hand elevation. Sit up, sit up. Once again, on our fingertips. Sit up. And of course, we're always holding for 15 seconds. And then you can already start elevating from here and try and hold for a handful of seconds. And then you can elevate up and hold. Pull in your toes for maximum stretch. And trust me, you're gonna get there pretty fast, but please don't forget about the flexibility or mobility part, because this is just as important as the strength. With all of that out of the way, the only thing that could make these exercises a lot more effective and help you progress a lot faster is liking this video and subscribing to this channel and joining us, because I don't want to die alone. I want to have friends.